Good morning. My name is Molly Sines. I'm the Regional Coordinator for the Partners Resource Network PIN project. We are the Parent Training and Information Center for your area, and we're funded by the Department of Education, Office of Special Education. We provide free workshops, trainings, and information and referrals to parents and professionals who live and work with those students with disabilities from birth to the age of 26. In addition, we provide free one-on-one technical assistance to parents. We would like to thank Consolidated Planning Group for their continued partnership with the Partners Resource Network and for having me on today. I'm so excited to be here with Allison Schwartzberg and Dr. Lindsay Asawa. So now I'll go ahead and I'll pass it on to Allison.
Thanks so much, Molly. It's a pleasure being here with you today. Allison Schwartzberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are happy to be partnered with Dr. Lindsay Asawa again today. It's always a pleasure to hear her presentation. She's got so many great, clever ideas when it comes to some of the things that as families with a loved one with a disability that we work through and deal with. So I'm excited to talk about this today. Consolidated Planning Group is a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors, members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. People come to us because they want to plan for the future of their loved one with a disability. We answer questions like, how much do I need to fund a special needs trust? Who's going to care for my child when I'm gone? What are the things that I need to be having on my radar now as we're considering and thinking about transitioning, whatever that transition may be? We are here to help with that. But so for the sake of time, we're going to dive right in to Lindsay's presentation. I always like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. We are in webinar mode today, and what that means is that we can't see you or hear you, but we do know you're there, and we're glad that you're here with us today. We are going for 1 hour today, so if you're planning your lunch or your day, we try to start on time and end on time. We're going to do this a little bit differently today. Typically, we take questions throughout the presentation and answer them throughout. We ask you to put your questions in the chat box, and we're going to answer questions today at the end of the presentation. This presentation is being recorded. Everyone that is registered will get a copy of today's slides, as well as a link to the recording. All of the recordings will live on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel after the fact. There are over 400 webinars on that YouTube channel on planning for special needs. Everything you can think of is out there, and we have tried to label them in such a manner so you can really search the topic that is near and dear to you that you really want to learn a little bit more about. So having said that, Dr. Asawa, it's such a pleasure to be back here with you, and we are excited for you to take it away.
Thank you so much, Allison. So there's a couple other, I just realized there's a couple more slides in here about Consolidated Planning Group, and I know you guys are all going to get access to this, so you can read through some of this other information. And let me get to this first slide. So I am Lindsay Asawa. I'm a licensed psychologist. I have a practice in Missouri City called Missouri City Family Counseling, where I do testing and evaluations for kids of all ages. And so I've been doing ADHD evaluations and testing for years, have also done therapy for years, working with children, teens, and adults with ADHD. And then on the personal side, I'm a mom. I have 3 kids, and they are ages 9, 11, and 14. And I would say at this point, we're pretty certain all 3 have ADHD brains. 2 have been diagnosed, and the 3rd, we're pretty certain, just because that's the type of brain that kind of runs in my family and my husband's family. So I'm very familiar with this diagnosis from a personal side as well as a professional side. And so I like doing these presentations. Sleep has been a really, really big issue that's come up in our therapy sessions and our evaluations for years. And so this was a topic that I wanted to talk about for families, and I'm going to divide it into 2 parts. I'm going to talk about some of the struggles that families of individuals with ADHD brains face regarding sleep, and then some of the strategies that might be helpful based on the research. So some of the struggles to start with, now just when we look at the statistics, people with ADHD brains tend to struggle more with sleep than those with non-ADHD brains. There's lots of research on this, lots of reasons for this, and I'll go into some of the reasons, but about 25 to 50% of people with ADHD have sleep difficulties, and we tend to see that increase with age rather than decrease. So 80% of adults with ADHD are reporting sleep problems. So it is a major issue, and it kind of seems like a chicken and egg issue. It's hard to say, what's causing what, but we'll get into that a little bit. One thing they have shown through the research is that earlier sleep problems, so with younger kiddos, when we see sleep problems, that can be a risk factor for a later diagnosis of ADHD. And it might just be kind of an early indicator because of some of the issues that we see related to sleep and ADHD brains. We also know that ADHD seems to be associated with both snoring and sleep apnea, as well as restless leg syndrome. And I see these diagnoses all the time when I'm doing evaluations and taking histories of my clients with ADHD. These are really common sleep conditions. Some of the major issues we see are trouble falling asleep as well as staying asleep. So waking up during the night. Sleep quality doesn't seem to be good. Lots of insomnia and intrusive sleep, which is just to say that sometimes individuals with ADHD brains will fall asleep without wanting to during the day. So that's like falling asleep during class, falling asleep during meetings. And this is another thing I hear about all the time from my clients. And stimulant meds, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but they're kind of complicated. They may impact sleep in different ways, both positive and negative. So sometimes some individuals, their sleep improves after they start on the stimulant medication because of the overall calming effect it has on them and on their nervous system. But then for others, stimulant meds can potentially disrupt sleep. And it depends on the time of day that you take the medication and how it affects your body. So that one's a little bit more complicated. Some of the reasons why sleep is an issue. This is kind of a list. If we pull out some of the common symptoms of ADHD and we ask, why are so many people with ADHD brains struggling with sleep? These are some of the reasons. So, and I hear about all of these racing thoughts. So, client after client will tell me that they can't turn their brain off. Even little kids will tell me this, that they can't turn their brain off when it's time to go to sleep. Their thoughts are just going, going, going. Another issue is hyperfocus, which is something we see with ADHD brains, is that tendency to focus in on one thing, and it's hard to shift your attention to something else. And that becomes a problem because the clients that I work with tend to spend too much time on something and lose track of time. And then before they know it, it's midnight and they've been working on the same project or reading the same book or playing the same video game for hours and hours without realizing it. So that impacts sleep. A lot of them just talk about some restless energy at night, just hard to wind their body down. So lots of, and again, I mentioned restless leg syndrome, which is a whole separate issue that might be going on, but a lot of individuals just talk about their body feeling very restless and energetic. And overstimulation is an issue. So with the ADHD brain, there's a tendency to get overstimulated by things like TV screens, the computers, tablets, phones, and that tends to overstimulate the brain because the ADHD brain has trouble regulating stimulation. So then when it's time to go to bed, it's hard to bring that stimulation back down. Lots of people tend to get distracted on the way to bed. They may have good intentions, but then may get distracted by something they forgot to do or something they need to do. And before they know it, they've lost time and it's late. Impulse control is also an issue for all ages for individuals with ADHD, and that can impact sleep because, again, if you have the sudden thought to go do something, then you may act on that thought rather than stopping to think through, it's time for bed. I need to stay on my schedule. I got to get up tomorrow early. So it's just acting on those impulses, which interferes with that sleep schedule. For seeking attention, this one relates more to younger kiddos with ADHD, but attention is very, very stimulating and powerful, particularly for the ADHD brain. And so a lot of our kids with ADHD when they're younger may have a tendency to seek attention at bedtime. And it can be very stimulating to them to get that attention, even if it's negative attention. So they may be getting out of their bed or playing games or being sneaky, and it's looking for that extra attention, and that interferes with sleep. It's hard to get motivated when you have an ADHD brain. So just being motivated to go to sleep and get in bed, which is boring, and it's hard to tolerate boredom when you have an ADHD brain. I hear this from my kids that just laying in bed is boring and they hate it. And so they're just not motivated to get in bed in the first place. And then time blindness is just that lack of awareness of time. And so we struggle with this with my oldest, my 14-year-old, you know, before he knows it, it's really, really late and he hasn't managed his time well and he hasn't finished his homework. And so that impacts sleep. And then he ends up with late nights. So if we look at the brain, the ADHD brain, and ask, why is this an issue? Why are we seeing higher rates of sleep problems with the ADHD brain? This part in the picture that's highlighted in pink is the frontal lobe, the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And what the research shows is that that part of the brain is not switched on. It's not stimulated to the level that it should be. And that's the part of the brain that controls a lot of the ADHD symptoms that we see. And the problem with that is that when we look at how sleep deprivation impacts our brain, the part of the brain that it has the biggest impact on is the frontal lobe, which is already understimulated when you have ADHD. So sleep deprivation when you have an ADHD brain is a very bad thing. It makes the ADHD symptoms significantly worse. And I'm always telling families that sleep is huge. It's a major factor. It's something that's very important. If you have a child or if you yourself have an ADHD brain, sleep is critical. And I've been very strict about it with my kids because of that, because I know that their brains need it even more than other kids. Another reason we see it is that there's lower dopamine levels, which is one of those chemicals in the brain. And it just in that frontal lobe, there's lower dopamine levels. And the reason that's a problem is because that's something that regulates our sleep. So when you have an ADHD brain, your brain has more trouble regulating sleep as far as your awake time and the times when you feel tired, and all of that is impacted. There's also now research showing that individuals with ADHD tend to have delays in their circadian rhythm, which is what keeps us on that cycle of sleeping and waking up. It's delayed, so they tend to get tired later and want to wake up later. And also part of the reason for that is delayed melatonin production. So our body produces its own melatonin, which makes us sleepy, but that's also delayed in people with ADHD brains. So a lot of this helps explain why I'm hearing this again and again and again from my clients with ADHD, that they're really struggling with sleep. The last one is just a couple other things they've found when they've looked at this in the research. Iron deficiency is more common with individuals with ADHD, and lower serum ferritin levels, both of which impact sleep. So there's several reasons why this is happening. And here's some of the things that it can cause. So when we have sleep deprivation, and this is in anyone, this is not just in those with ADHD brains. Yes, it causes an increase in ADHD symptoms, but it also causes this whole list of other issues that we see, which is why sleep is so important. And I have to kind of harp on this with my own kids, because a lot of people just don't understand the value, the importance of sleep, especially teens. Teens really struggle with this. They say, oh, I'm fine. I can get 5 hours of sleep and I'm great. But here's the things that it can lead to: mental fatigue, lots of tiredness, of course. It can contribute to depression and anxiety symptoms, which we already see a higher risk of when you have an ADHD brain. It does contribute to health issues. It takes a toll on your health over time, and there's several reasons for that that I won't go into. It can cause changes in your mood, like irritability. It can cause kids or adults to be more restless. We see more behavior problems in kids who are sleep deprived. We see kids avoiding school or refusing to go to school because they're tired in the mornings. And so it adds another layer of problems that parents are having to deal with. And it actually can impact their performance on cognitive tasks. And I do a lot of IQ testing, and I see that there is an impact of sleep on how kids perform. So even when I have people come in for testing, I'm really adamant that they have to have a good night's sleep when they come in. It also can impact grades, resiliency, being able to bounce back from difficult situations and cope with difficult things. That is harder when you're sleep deprived. And interestingly, it can actually increase the risk for injuries, and that's because of just tiredness, lack of awareness. And so kids are more likely, and adults are more likely to get injured. So these are all some issues that can come up when we have sleep deprivation. And they're bigger concerns even when it's with someone who has an ADHD brain. So one big question is, how much sleep is enough? You know, how much should we be aiming for? And this depends on age. A lot of people have that idea of 8 hours of sleep in their mind, that's how much everybody needs. But that's not actually the case for younger kids. They do need more sleep. Preschool, of course, that age group needs about 10 to 13 hours, and that's not including naps. Elementary, it decreases a little bit, but they still need 9 to 12 hours of sleep. And actually for teens, they're actually needing about 9 to 10 hours still. And most teens are not getting that. So in general, most teenagers are sleep deprived. And that's, of course, when you look at that list of issues that sleep deprivation can lead to, in addition to the hormones of the teen years and adolescence, then we've got a big problem on our hands. But that is what we need to be aiming for. And I know that that's challenging. I want to just say I have a 14-year-old who's in high school. I know how hard that is because they have a lot of homework. They have after school activities. And this is something we struggle with every day. But that is my goal. That is what I'm aiming for him. And it's not going to be perfect because there's a lot of things that get in the way of that. But as long as I can aim for that and I can help him aim for that, and there will be nights when he gets that amount of sleep, then that's the best that we can do at this age, from what I have learned. And then adults actually need about 7 or more hours minimum. So 7 is a minimum. So if you are getting by on 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night and you feel like that's enough, you feel like you have enough energy, you may not realize what's going on underneath the surface, you know, the way that it's impacting your brain, the way that it's impacting your health and your body. So these are important numbers to kind of aim for and keep in mind. So I know a lot of that was very negative. It's kind of focused on the problem, but I wanted this presentation to be a lot about what we can do, what the strategies are that might help. So here's a few things that I've pulled out that are kind of the most effective as far as what I've seen. A big one to think about, I mentioned the circadian rhythm earlier, which is those natural processes that follow our internal clock. So it's impacted by light and darkness. It's our body's natural way of kind of regulating when we're alert and when we're asleep. And it follows that cycle every day, a 24-hour cycle. And we know because individuals with ADHD brains tend to be delayed in that circadian rhythm. So we know that this is an important issue and we can maybe do some things about it. So one thing we can do is make sure that they are getting morning and daytime sunlight. So for kids who are inside all day in the darkness, sitting at a computer or sitting in a dark room on their phones, you know, these are things that can impact circadian rhythm. They need to be exposed to sunlight. And there's easy ways of doing that, just opening their blinds in the morning or having them go outside for a few minutes, do a quick walk in the morning. And during the day, it's extremely helpful if they can get outside for any amount of time, just to have that exposure to sunlight because it impacts the brain and that circadian rhythm. Naps can disrupt our circadian rhythm. So kids that get in, or adults that get in the habit of napping, that can really start to throw this cycle off. And it can be really hard to get it back on track again because you can get stuck in that cycle and things can get shifted pretty significantly. So really try to avoid naps if possible. And then at the end of the day, it's also actually helpful. A lot of families have found it helpful to be outside around sunset time, even if, again, if it's just a quick walk, we're setting outside on the porch. But it's a trigger for your brain. It helps your brain understand that the sun is going down and it's time to start preparing for sleep. At night, we can keep the bedroom dark with blackout curtains. For kids or adults who really, really are struggling and their circadian rhythm is very off track, there is a form of therapy called light therapy or phototherapy. There's lights that you can talk with the doctor about this. They are even available online. And it's something that you can do where you just sit in front of it for a certain amount of time every day, and it can help to kind of get your circadian rhythm back on track. There's also sunset lamps, and they will kind of mimic the sunset in the bedroom to give your brain those cues. And there's some wake up light alarm clocks that gradually get brighter as the sun is rising in the morning. So it also kind of mimics the effect of sunlight. So these are things that we can try just to get that circadian rhythm back on track. This is another really big one that I talk to families about all the time. And I think a lot of us are just not aware that this is happening. And sleep associations, what they are conditions that someone needs in order to fall asleep. So it's something that our brain associates with falling asleep. And if you stop and think about what you do every night or what you do for your children every night before bed, you are creating sleep associations when you do those things. And it could be objects, it could be activities, it could be noises in the room, it could be people that are around you, like a parent who's sleeping next to you. These are all sleep associations that we're creating in our brain. And the problem that can happen is that we can create some unhelpful sleep associations. And those can get us stuck in patterns of not being able to fall asleep or waking up and not being able to go back to sleep. They can really disrupt our sleep. And then what we need to do is kind of analyze what's going on at night. What are some sleep associations we've created that are not helpful, and how can we break those? And then how can we create some healthy sleep associations? So some of the healthy ones, for example, are having following the same routine every single night before bed, whether that's a warm bath or a warm shower, turning the lights down in the bedroom, turning on some soft music or a noise machine, turning the fan on, having, if for younger kids, having a stuffed animal that they sleep with or a blanket. These are things that are healthy sleep associations. And if we do the same exact thing every single night, our brain starts to associate those things with getting sleepy and falling asleep. And we have to be very rigid about it because, and I mentioned here, consistency. If you are inconsistent about those things, if you go to bed at different times every night, if you sometimes do certain things and other times do other things, then you don't have the consistency to create those sleep associations. It has to be the same thing every single night. So you have to be pretty rigid about it. In order to break some of the unhelpful ones, one thing that can often happen is that people can start to associate their bed with being awake. So if we lay in bed for 30 minutes and we're wide awake and our brain is going, our brain actually starts to associate the bed with feeling awake and stimulated as opposed to sleepy and tired. So we have to break that association. The best way to do that is if you're still awake after 15 or 20 minutes, and I put on here 20 to 30 minutes, but I would say less than that, 15 or 20 minutes, then get out of the bed and don't do anything stimulating. Stay in the bedroom, stay nearby, keep the lights turned down, keep things quiet and calm, but do something that just helps to soothe you so you're ready to get back in the bed. It could be just reading for a little bit, sitting and listening to some music, drawing, just something calm, and then get back in bed when you're starting to feel drowsy again. And you have to repeat that process until you've kind of broken that association. And it really does work. It takes some effort, but it does work. One thing we have to be careful not to do is interfere with these healthy sleep associations we've created. So anytime we add something to nightly routine, or we remove something that we've already been doing, or we change the routine or the environment in some way, it's going to disrupt those sleep associations. And the work that you put into it is you're gonna kind of be backtracked a little bit. And you can get back on track, but it's just something to be aware of. These sleep associations are really, really important. And it's a huge reason for the difficulties that I see in kids, especially falling asleep or staying asleep at night. And so it's really worth thinking through these and understanding what's going on. So overstimulation, again, this is not just for individuals with ADHD brains, although it's more important if you have an ADHD brain, but this applies to everyone. So when our brain is at a high level of stimulation, then it's hard to wind down and fall asleep. So what we have to do is avoid things that might overstimulate our brain before bed. So there's been lots of research looking at this, and what studies have really confirmed is that we really need to be turning off screens about an hour before bedtime. For a while, they were saying 30 minutes before bedtime, but now it's actually looking like an hour, especially if you have an ADHD brain. An hour is ideal because those screens are very stimulating for the brain. And because of those sleep associations I just finished talking about, the bed should be a no screen zone, because if you are on your screens or even watching TV from the bed, you are creating an association between being in your bed and having your brain be stimulated. So we need to disconnect that. The bed should be a no screen zone where you get in it and you feel sleepy and you fall asleep. We need to also avoid things like caffeine, alcohol, sugar, large snacks or meals right before bed, or midnight snacking, getting out of the bed and going and having a snack, because all of these things can be stimulating to the brain. And it gets us off track. It starts creating the wrong sleep associations. And then before we know it, we're stuck in that vicious cycle again. For for everyone, I guess, but for many of the clients I work with ADHD brains, daytime exercise is critical. That's why I have that in bold on there. I've been told again and again and again from my clients that when they get exercise during the day, they tend to sleep better at night and fall asleep quicker. So if they're not getting much exercise, they're not burning off that energy and that fidgety restlessness, then it's going to be harder to wind down at bedtime. So daytime exercise is so important, and low activity at bedtime. So the opposite. I don't want them to be exercising right before they get into bed, because that's going to stimulate the brain. So it needs to be some calmer, quieter activities at bedtime. Lighting does matter. So keeping the lighting low, but maybe just having a night light, or some individuals do better with a sleep mask to block out light, because again, lighting can be overstimulating to the brain. And then sometimes lowering the temperature in the room or using a fan. People do tend to sleep better with lower temperatures. So that can be something that can bring that overall level of stimulation down. And other relaxing activities, like a lot of people swear by warm milk, reading before bed, taking a warm bath or shower, doing some stretching, again, not any intense exercise, massages, back and neck rubs. Those are things that just can help to relax the body and reduce the level of stimulation in your brain. Weighted blankets are something that I think are really helpful to try. A lot of our kids with ADHD, and adults and teens with ADHD brains, tend to have some difficulty with sensory input. And so when we use a weighted blanket, it can be very soothing to the senses. It can give you some calming sensory input that can help to reduce your stimulation. So these are all some good ways to reduce overstimulation. And then that issue with racing thoughts that I hear about all the time. So that is a real problem that a lot of the clients I've worked with have really struggled with. How do I turn my thoughts off so I can fall asleep? And there's several strategies here. So a lot of people do well with audiobooks, as long as they're not exciting, stimulating books, but sometimes I have clients who listen to the same story over and over again just because it's soothing, especially if you listen to someone who is reading it in a soothing voice. Some clients I've worked with use podcasts, again, not stimulating, exciting podcasts. But if it's something familiar and repetitive, then you're also more likely to be soothed by that and to kind of zone out and start to fall asleep. There's some really great relaxation and guided imagery tracks that you can get online. There's lots of great apps that have these relaxation tracks as well. Doing some light reading can also shift your brain away from these racing thoughts and give it something to focus on that's not stimulating. And one thing we teach clients is actually to kind of notice that those thoughts are happening and let them pass by. So don't put any pressure on yourself to fall asleep. Don't put any pressure on yourself to address those thoughts because that can actually add to the problem. And so just kind of knowing that they're there and letting them pass by as if they're kind of a cloud passing overhead, that can be one of the most helpful things. My oldest son, he's always struggled with racing thoughts. And I asked him one day, you know, how have you managed that? What's been the most helpful thing for you? And this is what he said was most helpful, letting those thoughts just pass by. He used to fight them. He used to worry and thought he needed to write them down or do something with them or tell me something he thought about. But now he just lets them pass by and he doesn't put any pressure on himself. And that really works for him. There's several ideas here for some helpful noise that helps to kind of drown out those racing thoughts. There's some good white noise apps. And white noise can be helpful also because it can eliminate other distracting noises that might keep kids or adults awake. The Calm app has some good noises as well as music on there. The Relax Melodies app does as well. One of the suggestions I've been given is ADHD Lullaby, which is there's a CD of some music that was specifically designed for people with ADHD brains based on neurological research, music therapy research, several things. They took all of that and they created this album of music. And it's unusual music and not everybody will like it, but it's really interesting because I've worked with lots of clients who have said that that's really helped them. And I can say from personal experience, that is another thing that worked like magic for our oldest son. And he still listens to it every single night as he falls asleep. It really worked for him. Lo-fi music and then the 432 hertz music, both of those have research behind them showing that they can be really calming and soothing and help with sleep because there's a lot of slow repetitive sounds that are very soothing. Another of the big issues that gets in the way that I talked about earlier is the lack of motivation to get in bed and go to sleep. And this is a stumbling block for a lot of the clients I work with is, you know, I just don't want to get in bed. And the issue with motivation is that's what gets us going. But if we can just do the same thing, then habit is what keeps us going. So I like that quote on the right-hand side because that's very true. I've seen that many, many times. If we can just make something a habit, then we can continue with it and we can get ourselves on track. But we first have to motivate ourselves to do it or motivate our kids to do it in the first place. So these are just some suggestions that I've seen work, giving control over choices. This is for younger kids and for teens, but giving them some choices and letting them decide, you know, as far as maybe the order of their bedtime routine or what book do they want to read or do they want to sleep with this blanket or that blanket tonight? You know, giving some choices just to kind of get them in the bed and help them feel like they have some control. We use reward systems just to get kids on track with bedtime. And these can be really helpful because it's something visual. You can hang a chart on the wall and you can set up some rewards that they can earn or time that they can earn doing things that they enjoy. And that can motivate them just to get in the habit of going to bed on time every night. And I'm telling you these things partly because I've also used all of these things with my 3 kids to get them on track with their bedtimes. And these have worked. Check-ins, the idea of the check-ins is for kids who are looking for attention, who are coming out of their room, making excuses, saying, I need another drink of water. I need to go to the bathroom again. Oh, I have to tell you one more thing. That's a lot of kind of attention-seeking behavior. And so what we do is instead of giving them attention when they come out, we flip that around and we say, if you stay in bed, I'm going to come back and I'm going to check in on you in 5 minutes. And then if they're still in bed, then, you know, give them another kiss or another hug or tell them good job and say, I'm going to come back and check on you in 10 more minutes. And honestly, by then, many kids are asleep. But you can do this a couple of times. And again, it creates a habit. Then they're going to stay in their bed. They're going to be more likely to stay in their bed every night after that if you start with that check-in process. And you can phase it out. You don't have to keep doing it. The bedtime pass is another good one just to keep kids in their bed and motivate them. If they're coming out a lot or avoiding getting in bed, you can give them a bedtime pass and tell them they get to use it one time during the night to get out of bed. And again, it gives them a sense of control. They like having that because it's a tangible thing. And what's funny about it is they really do think carefully then about what they want to use it for. They're not going to waste their bedtime pass on running to get a drink of water. They might want to save it. And so it just gets them back on track again, and then you will no longer need that bedtime pass. Reinforce the positives. So don't be reinforcing negative behaviors at bedtime. If kids are pushing back and they're not listening, or they're running out of their room, they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. And if you're giving that lots and lots of attention, they're just going to keep doing those things. So really try to look for the positives. If they cooperate, or if they stay in their bed for 5 minutes, or if they, anything that you see that's positive, really try to reinforce the positive to keep them motivated to do it. And another thing that's worked, this is more also for teens and adults, is having something enjoyable that they can look forward to in the morning. That actually will motivate them to want to go to sleep. So I had a client who decided she had tried all kinds of things to get herself to go to sleep. She was a teenage client. And one thing that worked for her was her and her mom decided that if she was up by a certain time in the morning, they would be able to stop by a coffee shop and get a drink on the way to school. And it was kind of her little reward. And that motivated her to want to get to bed at night so she could get up by a certain time and be able to have that reward. So something little like that can make a big difference. Lastly, I wanted to put some treatment ideas for kids or adults who are really struggling. If these other behavioral strategies are not helping, these are some other ideas that the research supports. So a low dose of melatonin can be helpful, but only as the key is only as a short-term treatment, because a lot of people are kind of overusing melatonin and they're starting to rely on it because they're using it in the long term, or they're using doses that are higher than necessary. And really what they found in the research is all it takes is a low dose just as a short-term treatment so you can get your sleep on track, because we have to also be considering all the other things I mentioned, creating those sleep associations and following a good routine. So this is just to help you get on track. And it should be taken 1 to 2 hours before bedtime, because if you take it too close to bedtime, it's not going to be as helpful. And then you're going to be laying in your bed for 30 minutes or an hour feeling awake and creating the wrong sleep association. So make sure to take it well enough before bedtime. I mentioned earlier that ADHD medications can help for some people with sleep, but it can also disrupt sleep and interfere. So really the timing matters, and you have to stay in touch with your doctor about that. If it's impacting sleep, we don't want that to be the case, because that's going to create bigger issues. So go back to the doctor, talk with them about it, and they can make adjustments, or you can talk about a different time to take the medication. Iron supplements for those who have iron deficiency can improve sleep. Magnesium has also been shown to improve sleep, and it improves restless legs. But it has to be taken 30 minutes before bedtime. And then there's a treatment, a type of therapy that's evidence-based. It's called CBTI, which is cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. And this is a really structured type of therapy that's only designed to treat insomnia. But it really does work. It improves sleep in 70 to 80% of patients, so it's very effective. So these are the ones that the research will support if you are needing treatment to address the sleep issues. So that's all I have for today. I don't have all the answers with sleep, but these are just some ideas from the work that I've done and the research that I've done on this topic. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer. I think we have time for a few questions.
For sure. Please put your questions in the chat box and we will get to those. I know that this is, man, wow, it is a challenge for a lot of families, and a lot of families have, you know, comorbid conditions that, you know, complicate things as well. Someone in the chat box said, do you recommend a sleep study?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, and I didn't mention that, but I do recommend a sleep study, because if there is an underlying sleep issue like sleep apnea, then that needs to be adequately treated, and that's part of the puzzle that needs to be solved. So I do recommend it if sleep is a major issue, if it's been an ongoing issue. One thing I do when I do my assessments and my evaluations is I really pick apart what's going on. You know, I get a good thorough history of how long has the sleep issue been going on? Tell me what happens at night. What is the sleep routine like? When did this start? What have you tried? If we go through some of those things, we can often kind of sort it out and figure out, okay, here's the problem. Here's what's going wrong. Here's what you can try. And so I think having a therapist or the pediatrician or someone go through that with you and help you identify some things that might need to be adjusted, that is one option. But for the clients I have who have ongoing sleep issues, they've tried a lot of these strategies, then I do worry about potentially an underlying medical issue. And for those clients, I do always refer for a sleep study. And I think that's always a good idea.
What about EEGs? Do you recommend EEGs, and what do they show?
Well, they show brain activity, and I mean, I'm not a neurologist or a physician, so I'm not going to be able to speak to that entirely, but I would say that's not always necessary. So I wouldn't always recommend it for every client. Again, I think in most cases, there are behavioral factors that are impacting sleep. And so I think we could always go through the process of getting a full medical workup and running some more extensive tests, but I don't think it's always necessary. So I think that, again, that would be, I would recommend further tests, medical tests like EEGs and sleep studies if it's been an ongoing issue, if you've tried these behavioral strategies and those have not been effective, and you've consulted with your physician about this, then maybe that would be the next step. I don't typically recommend starting with that just because it could be unnecessary.
And in the way of testing, what about, do you recommend vitamin or mineral deficiency testing as well?
Yeah, again, I think that that's something that you should absolutely talk with the doctor about. Again, if you kind of rule out some of these behavioral factors and it's continuing to be a concern, then that is one of the things that I think would be part of that medical workup, is looking at if there are any underlying vitamin deficiencies, if there's you know, iron deficiency, and that's something that needs to be treated. These are all things I think it's good to keep in contact with the physician, let them know what you've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, how long this has been going on. One thing I would say, just having worked with pediatricians and physicians for years, we're kind of looking at different things. And so when you talk with your doctor, they may go straight to some of these medical concerns because that might be what's in the back of their mind. But oftentimes I see those same clients and we do kind of a behavioral workup, and I find some very significant factors that are probably impacting their sleep. And if we can address those, then there's oftentimes no need for the medical interventions. So I'm getting more and more referrals now from physicians when there's sleep issues because they're wanting us to kind of dig further and figure out, is there something else? Are there other reasons for this? They may not, a lot of physicians don't necessarily have the training in the behavioral side of sleep. And so they're going to be looking at it from a different angle, if that makes sense.
For sure. Do people with ADHD, ADD need or benefit from more sleep than the average person?
Yes, they do. And because of what we talked about with that issue with the frontal lobe, it's already understimulated. So if you are in any way sleep deprived or getting less than the amount of hours that are needed, it's going to have a more significant impact on you if you have an ADHD brain. So those hours, those amounts that I mentioned earlier, they were ranges, right? Like 9 to 12 hours a night. Well, kids with ADHD tend to be on the upper end of that. I would aim for more sleep. They need their sleep badly. And again, that's one of those, it's kind of a red flag for me when I hear from parents, oh, he's always been really affected by sleep. He needs to have his sleep, or he has a really bad day the next day. That's a red flag for ADHD because the brain is so impacted by that lack of sleep. So yes, definitely.
I know medications affect different people differently always, as there's no, slam dunk on how a medication, works for somebody. But do you see differences in sleep issues with patients taking one dose extended release ADHD meds versus 2 to 3 doses a day for the short acting meds?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that since I don't prescribe the medications. I would just say from my end, as a psychologist working with clients, doing these evaluations and gathering information, what I have seen from my end is that it's really hit or miss. I've seen clients that struggle with sleep who are on long acting doses, and I've seen clients struggle with sleep who are on short acting doses that take it multiple times a day. So I think it's hit or miss. In fact, in general, ADHD medications are hit or miss, right? A lot of us as parents have seen this. It's really hard to know which medication is going to work best for your child and what kinds of side effects you may see or what kind of benefits you may see. It's very much still trial and error, which is frustrating, but I would say the impact on sleep is the same. It's almost impossible to predict, what medications or what type of dose is going to impact their sleep and how. So you really just have to work closely with your doctor and give them that feedback. Let them know that your child is struggling with sleep. We dealt with this with my oldest when we started him on stimulant medication, and he was dealing with insomnia for a little while. And I went back and talked with the doctor about that. That was really important to me. As a side effect, I did not want to start that sleep issue with him. And so we adjusted the dose, we adjusted the time that he took it. And I was very strict about all of these strategies we talked about. I made sure he only uses his bedroom really just for sleep. I made sure he's got darkness when he needs to, light when he needs to. He's got his that ADHD lullaby CD that he listens to. He does the same routine every night before bed. I was very strict about those things, and we got him back on track with his sleep, even with the medication on board. So there has to be kind of a combination of both. You have to be doing these strategies and then also working with your doctor to make adjustments to the medication if it's impacting sleep.
Very good. Lindsay, I know that Missouri City Family Counseling obviously provides counseling, but you guys do extensive testing as well. So for families that are interested in having testing done or further, conversations on this matter, I know that they can reach out to you, but I also know that you are very networked and you keep your ear to the ground on who's who on the other areas that you guys don't handle. And I was wondering if you could send us a list of any recommendations of Texas colleagues in this field, who you're aware of that can support some of these strategies or can get some help for some really struggling families.
Yes, definitely. And I would say working with a therapist who has experience dealing with sleep. I mean, not all therapists are trained and understand some of these sleep strategies, but many do. And I think that's always a great place to start. And also, of course, working with the physician or the pediatrician. But I can give one overall suggestion for finding a therapist. We use this all the time. This resource is psychologytoday.com. You can do a search on there according to your insurance, according to the age range of the person, the client, the area that you live in, your zip code. You can put in several factors and do a very specific search to find therapists who exactly meet what you are looking for. At our practice right now, we have a couple of therapists with availability more for working with teens or adults or couples right now. Our child therapists, unfortunately, are full at the moment. We do have a wait list as well. And then just another thing to throw out there, we do also offer social skills groups. I know we're not talking about that today, but we have a group starting on Monday for any families with kids 8 to 12 who struggle with social skills. But as far as sleep, yeah, I think working one-on-one with a professional, a therapist, and then your physician can really help with that process. And it may not be a long process. I've done that with clients where we've done maybe 6 sessions, 5 or 6 sessions, just to kind of pick apart what's going on, what can we change and modify, and just getting their sleep on track. And so it doesn't have to be a long-term thing. So yeah, I can send you a couple of suggestions.
And we have 2 more questions before we close. Is the social skills for neurotypical only or for kiddos on the ADHD autism spectrum?
For all kids. So any kids who struggle with social skills. The one that we're doing right now is a teamwork group. So we're kind of focusing on teamwork skills, working together, communicating, having good listening skills, being able to tolerate when things don't go well, and respecting others, those kinds of things. And we usually do 6 or 8 week groups. So they're short-term groups, meeting once a week. And they are for kids who are neurotypical or kids who are neurodiverse, either one.
Perfect. Okay, last 2. Is it harmful for children to take melatonin long term? I know you mentioned you suggest melatonin as a short-term, a short-term trial, but does it harm them for them to take it long term?
Well, so I don't want to say yes or no to that. I haven't looked at the research on long-term physical impact on kids of taking melatonin. What I can speak to is the behavioral impact and the psychological impact, because, and to me, I do see it being harmful as a long-term solution, only because it interferes with these other factors that can really help your child get on track with their sleep and stay on track with their sleep. We don't want them necessarily to be dependent on something for long term, right? To keep their sleep on track. I definitely think it's a great solution for getting them on track. And especially looking at the research, there's no harm in those low doses for short-term purposes to get them on track. That I can definitely say is something that's useful and something that's not harmful and can help to kind of get their circadian rhythm back in track. But long-term physical impact, I can't speak to. I would say to talk with your physician about that. If that's something that's already been the case, if you've already been doing it long-term, or if you've thought about that as an option for the long-term, I would say to do that. But for me, it's really an issue of, I would want them on track with their sleep using these other strategies and not relying on just taking that melatonin every night. And I'm saying this also as a parent who has used it. We've used melatonin, but I use it very sparingly. I use it as needed. If it's those nights where my son is really struggling, and he's been in bed for 30 minutes, and then those are the nights I may give him, again, just a very low dose, but I use it only when needed.
Okay, so on these social skills classes, they can find more information and pricing on your website, MissouriCityFamilies.com, and can sign up for that. And those classes are starting next week. So if you're interested, take a look at that website today. Again, you guys are going to get a copy of these slides. So here's a question. If we as parents of an adult child are already asleep well before the time our 24-year-old is ready, how can we motivate and monitor? Do you have any suggestions for adult kids? I know we have a wide variety of audience here, from young kids to older kids that have sleep struggles. What are your suggestions for that?
Yeah, that's a real struggle. And I'm already getting into that with our 14-year-old. And so I understand that it's hard for us as parents to always control those factors. I would say the best strategy at that point as kids get older is to get them on board. We can talk to them, I think we can talk to them about the things that I just talked about in this presentation. And I do that with my clients, my teen clients and my young adult clients. I educate them about how important sleep is for their brain and their body. I try to figure out what matters to them and how can I tie that in. So, I had a client who was really enthusiastic about baseball. He didn't care about school, but baseball was his thing. So we talked about how lack of sleep was impacting him in baseball. And that was important to him. That mattered. So he was willing to make some changes to get better sleep so that he could be the best baseball player he could be. My son cares a lot about grades and not missing school. And so I have to remind him regularly that, listen, if you are not getting good sleep, you're going to get sick. And then you are going to miss some days of school. It's going to be hard to keep up. So let's keep you on track with your sleep. And so we have to kind of find ways to motivate them, but talk to them in a more mature way, teach them why this is important, because they're not going to do it because we said so at that point, right? When they get to a certain age, they have to decide this matters to them. And sometimes it might be kind of letting them see what happens and just helping them process it. Why do you think that didn't go so well? Did you get enough sleep that night? Kind of helping them make the connection, because we can't be there to supervise and oversee all of that. There's also ways we can problem solve with our teens and our young adults. Maybe there's things that we need to change around in their schedule or things we can take off their plate. But we might need to just have a conversation about, like, what can we do to help you get to bed earlier? What would help? Is there anything I can do? And make sure they understand why this is important. So yeah, I think that's
And
the
I
best you
think
can do
the
at that
outside
age.
counsel at that age, I think the
Mhm.
outside counsel is important because often at that age, they don't really care what the parent thinks. But if
Yes.
you get input, from somebody else, outside counsel, a team that is nuanced in sleep struggles, then they may be able to work with that person and formulate a plan that's their own plan, so they're good at
Yes.
they're good with implementing it. I think that's a good thing. Okay, so very last thing, do children with ADHD, ADD benefit from several activities? I want to say that we do have an ADHD specific support group that meets the last Tuesday of every month, and it is online, and we talk about a lot of these things and have various speakers. So I wanted to mention that to you guys as well. But, are you the opinion of let's do one thing, let's focus on that one thing, and let's finish the completion and move on to something else? Are you a fan of, these kids have something stimulating every single night of the week, and 7 days a week they're into something. Maybe they're doing karate, and maybe they're doing dance and art. And what is your thoughts on that for the ADHD brain?
Yeah, so for the ADHD brain, the key things are making sure that they do have physical activity and exercise, and that does need to be daily. So if they're doing a sport that involves, multiple practices a week or daily conditioning, that kind of thing, then I actually think that's a great use of part of their afternoon or evening time. That's really good for them. But the big thing with our kids with ADHD is that they struggle with time management, they struggle with motivation, they struggle with attention, all these issues with getting things done, especially after school when their brain is tired. And so if they are not able to get to bed at a reasonable time because their evenings are packed full of too many activities and they're not able to do their homework efficiently, then something needs to give because sleep has to be prioritized. So I think you do have to make decisions trying to keep sleep as a priority, and then look at your child. How much homework do they have? How quickly are they able to get through it? Are you able to set up some accommodations that helps them manage their homework a little better? And are you doing activities that are worth their time? Not just filling their time, but is it really worth doing? Is it something that gives them exercise, that makes them feel good about themselves, that, helps them practice social skills? Those are all wonderful things as long as you are able to manage all that and get them to bed at a reasonable time. So that's going to be different for every family, that decision, but those are the factors I would look at in making those decisions. And there might be times when it changes, when the homework load increases, it might be time then to cut back on some of those other activities, making sure they still get their exercise in, but maybe not doing so many things because they've got to be able to get through the homework and still get to bed at a reasonable time. Sleep is
Lindsay,
something
I
that
think
often
about,
is sorry about that, Allison. I was just going to say it just across the board with my clients that I work with, I see sleep being sacrificed very often, you know, and I think a lot of people take it lightly. They think, well, yeah, he goes to bed late, but he's doing all these wonderful things. But the going to bed late really is a problem. And that's what I'm kind of trying to show today, is that we have to not sacrifice sleep if we can. We have to keep that as a priority.
I think we have to not sacrifice family balance and our own sanity as well. So when we're thinking
Yes.
about the activities of our kids and what what they're going to be in and what is involved with these various activities, and balancing your full-time job, 2 full-time jobs, you know, of a family and all of the other multiple kids and things like that. I feel like I can speak from this from having grown kids. I think that there's value of dinner around the kitchen table, you know, and slowing down to where it is not 7 nights a week, you know, and even if you have multiple kids that, you know, this is Danny's turn. Danny gets to do an activity and it runs 6, 8, 12 weeks, and then it's the other child's turn.
Yes.
So, you know, little things like that. I think we never have to tell parents to think more about their kids because that's all we think about, but thinking about yourself and your own balance and your own sleep and the sleep that you need as well. I think that those things are really, really important. Well, guys, we are out of time today. And as usual, Lindsay, you did a fantastic job. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today. Thank you for putting your questions in the chat box. Everyone is going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording. It will have our contact information as well as Lindsay's contact information. Will include the Partners Resource Network information as well. And so we look forward to meeting with you guys again. Thank you guys so much, and I hope everyone has a great day.